Welcome back to the final part of the Terminator painting captain guide. In this one, we're going to go through how to do transfers. And before I get to the miniature itself, none of this is painting. The magazine itself doesn't come with any transfers, but once you get into the hobby, even picking up just one box of space marines, you're going to end up with probably more transfers than you're going to need for your first army. As an example there, these are offcuts of the Space Marine transfer sheet, the Dark Imperium transfer sheet, that's the 8th edition box set, and a Sister of Battle one. Or Witch Hunters, when they were called Witch Hunters before what they are now. Don't throw them away. Just have a nice little collection of them at the back. Don't have to keep too many. We're going to need a paper towel. I've got these pair of fabric scissors. These are for cutting loose ends for tailors, but I quite like them because they shear nicely and they're sprung loaded. A very clean but old worn paintbrush. This is just for pulling and pushing the transfers around when they're on your mini. You will need two specialist types of product here. This stuff is called Decal Fixer from Green Stuff World. It's not quite what I first thought it was, which is the blue version of this micro set. So if you can get micro set, even better. Essentially all this is a gloss varnish. So you can use any gloss varnish, even Lamy and medium will work. I've bought this, so I'm going to use it. And this one is Micro Sol. Clues in the name there, that is a solvent. What it's going to do is it's going to dissolve a part of the transfer sheet. I'll now explain how transfers work. I don't know how well the camera's going to pick this up. Let's try zooming in a little. Now if I roll this backwards and forwards, you can see the light catching it. See the transfer detail itself. If you look between that and the blue paper, you'll see a slight edge. That's the silvering. So that's actually the what the transfer's printed onto. It's not actually this paper, this blue paper, isn't what the transfer is printed on. There's a film underneath the print detail, and that will lift off the paper when it's wet. It's water. It's not water solvent. Problem is, when you put that on your miniature, you will see that glint and the edge or second edge of the printing. What Microsol will do was dissolve that film, leaving just the painted or printed transfer. There's probably a lot of science going on there and I've oversimplified it, but just bear with me. What I need to do is cut out all the transfers you want to use. So I'm going to do that. When you get to your miniature, pick out the ones you want because you're not going to have exactly the same ones as me. I've picked out the 4 transfers I'm going to use, the 4 different designs, and I've also picked out where on the miniature they're going to go. The next step is I need to get them nice and wet, so lift off the backing paper. Now, I use a paper towel to do this just because it's easier on the cleanup. The water's not going to go anywhere, and it's going to keep the transfers nice and wet until they're ready to use. What I don't want is them to slip out with a little puddle on the plastic matting. They dry out. Also, if they do float off, then they're just going to hit a paper towel, which is still wet, and I can still lift them off. So from experience, I like to use the paper towel. You're going to want to give that a couple of minutes to soak in. While we wait for those transfers to soak up the water, I'm just going to use that gloss medium or transfer solution to paint over the area the transfer will be. We don't have to be too neat about this, just get the whole area it's going to go around, or if not the whole area, wider than the transfer will be. So for me, I'm just going to do these 2 front-facing shields and the shoulder guard. What I do, I'm going to make sure of is that those are thoroughly dried. You can just take this over to your hairdryer if you have one and force dry them that way. That's not going to make any difference. We'll jump back in and the transfers should be ready to go. With the gloss varnish or decal fixer thoroughly cured, we're ready to apply our transfers. The best way to test if these are ready to go is just get your paintbrush, sort of try to wiggle them around. There we go. Yeah, these are all ready to be lifted off. So we're going to do these 2 shoulder guards first. Ooh, carefully, don't jump around too much. This is very delicate work. The best way I found to do it is get them right next to each other. We are, as the name suggests, just going to slide them over. Like so. That's not its final position. I just need to manipulate it a little. Can you see all the creases? I'm going to try and get those out. Like the brush, doesn't need to be too wet. And work from the middle outward. Get it nice and flat. Like so. Right, let's try the next one. Go for this blue ultramarine symbol. It's a smaller one, so I'm going to try and lift it off in one. Like so. Plonk it down. I'm just going to pull, poke, until it's in position. These are super delicate when you get them. So you may tear them by accident. Hopefully you got a few. It does take a while to get them right. Also, these two are the easy surfaces because although they have a curve in them, like so, they are flat on the other plane. When we get to this surface where it's curved both this way and that way, this symbol here, the U symbol, will be especially difficult. But we're going to give it a go. It's a very careful balancing act to get, because if you get them too wet, you'll have a water barrier between the transfer and the miniature. And you'll be pushing it around for ages, trying to push the water out from underneath it. And it will never quite sit right. Oh, this is a well-designed one, though. I'll explain why in a second. Again, just scalpel it into position. The problem with it is that transfer medium, the skin, wants to sit flat. It doesn't like it's sitting out at angle, so you can see there. I can just get the knife blade in underneath it, although it looks flat from this angle, and likewise up here. Now, I said it was a good or a better transfer, is because there's actually a gap here. Some of the transfers you'll get, this whole area here will be joined up. You just have to cut a little slot across it so the U will fall straight. Now, I am never going to get this to sit straight unless I use Microsol. What I need to do first is use a paper towel, make sure it's pushed down as flat as possible, let the water dry for a couple of minutes, and then I'll put the Microsol on. The water's evaporated off our transfers, and if I sort of roll this around, if light catches it just so, you can see the silvering that the transfer is sat on top of. Now I'm going to use our Microsol to soften it up and get rid of it. Hopefully, if the water's evaporated, it should be sat on there and not lift off when you apply this stuff. This transfer will be slightly different. We're actually trying to get underneath it where possible. And that's going to leave the transfer alone. It's going to attack the silvering it's sitting on. And that should make the transfer collapse onto that shaped surface. Now, we do need to leave it a few seconds. And then we're going to use a paper towel to wipe off the excess. So this will be a bit of a time cut. You'll need to leave it for a minute or so at least. I'm just going to explain what's happened here. So this was sat originally, I thought at least, nice and square. Now it's actually slanted off to the right. This is because the silvering's collapsed and transfer's fallen onto the mini. So I can actually still, if I'm very gentle, manipulate the transfer if it does go a little bit skew-if. Can you see how? Yes. Yeah, that'll work. These two lines on the inside of the U are no longer parallel. That means it's working, basically, because the transfer's lost its silvering, it's lost its structure. It's now conforming to the shape of the shoulder pad. So that's a good sign. You can also see if I catch the light, you can see the edges of the silvering are all wrinkling up. That's perfect. That's what we're looking for. At this stage, I'm going to come in with a bit of tissue paper, kitchen roll. I'm going to gently apply downward pressure onto it, and that's going to erase all of those wrinkles. If I push down and move it, I'll take the entire transfer off and ruin it. You won't be able to save that. I'm going to do the same over here. Yeah, these two you could get away with not doing. You could just put the decal fixer back over the top, or a gloss varnish of choice, and that will achieve it. But as I'm doing this one, I'll do the other two as well. Second application, again, going to leave it. I'm going to keep an eye on it just in case it starts moving around. Now, if you apply too much of this, it's still a liquid. So if you get underneath that silvering, it's going to start shifting around. It's going to slide off your miniature under its own weight. So little amounts, keep an eye on it. Transfers haven't shifted around. Again, so lightly absorb what's left of the microsol. All the surfaces. So there's a slight crease just here. So where the silvering has dissolved, that's collapsed in on itself. There's not much you can do about it. It's only a slight amount, and only if you're really looking for it will you notice. Once it's at this stage, the decals are nice and soft. It's all very malleable. If you were to apply anything over top of this, it might slip off and crease and damage them. So you need to thoroughly let them dry. Leave this to sit for at least half an hour before we go on to the next step. Now that we've left our transfers for a good half hour or so, I'll use the decal fixer or the gloss varnish, whatever have you. I'm just going to seal over the top. Just going to put a tiny layer of this over up. So it's these gloss varnish type things. They're just acrylic medium. That's all they are. So nothing can get under the miniature, under the transfer, sorry, after this is applied. Seals it in nicely. Main benefit of this is when you're picking up the miniature on these areas, you won't accidentally rub the transfer off. Now, these will dry gloss, and that's a bit of an issue because none of the rest of the model is gloss. Well, you could make the whole model gloss and that'll solve that issue, I guess. But we'll go back in with Lamy and medium, and that will tone it all back down to match the rest of the paint. Thoroughly cure this, and we'll be back in a sec. It's thoroughly dried off. You can see it's slightly more reflective than the matte areas around it. A bit of Lamy and medium I've already got on my palette. Only a tiny amount. Coat over all the areas with gloss varnish and go a little bit beyond them as well. Make sure we thoroughly cover all of it. It doesn't matter if you actually paint over onto any other areas, as long as you don't hit the metallics that are slightly gloss. One coat should do it, and then make sure it dries. Because we've used GW acrylics throughout, and we now use Lamy and medium is essentially the what the paint pigments sit in. So they have the same shininess, which is matte. And now our transfers have blended in perfectly. Well, yeah, we've taken him from sprue, fully painted and transferred up. Hope you had as much fun as I did with that. And, well, I don't know if I'll do any more, but if I did, I'll probably do the Terminator Prime next. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see anything in particular. I'm sure I'll see you around. Take care. Bye.